We have a hubris that all the new technology and all the new science is coming forth from our world in the last few years. But guess what? There were civilizations here over 10,000 years ago. They knew stuff that we're just beginning to find out. They knew stuff that was so far advanced that we wouldn't even think about it. One of the things that we're going to talk about today are the Hermetic Principles. Now, these are principles about the nature of life on this planet that were created over 5,000 years ago. But what's so interesting about them? No matter how old they are scientifically accurate at this moment right now. But before we go into them, I'd like to give us a little history about the Hermetic Principles, and then let's compare those principles from 5,000 years ago to what we know today.
Here to shed light on the profound connection between ancient wisdom and modern science is Bruce Lipton, Ph.D., a distinguished cell biologist and lecturer whose groundbreaking work reveals how our beliefs can shape our biology and destiny, offering a transformative perspective on human evolution and empowerment. The Seven Hermetic Principles originate from an ancient school of thought that stretches back tens of thousands of years. In more recent history, these teachings were compiled in a book written in 1908 called The Kybalion by 3 initiates. This book centers around a mysterious and profound figure known as Hermes Trismegistus, which translates to Hermes, the thrice greatest. Scholars and academics often debate whether Hermes Trismegistus was a real historical figure or a symbolic convergence of an ancient intellectual collective. This enigmatic character shares attributes with other ancient deities, such as Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing and wisdom, and Hermes, the Greek god of communication and the messenger of the gods. The significance of the 7 Hermetic Principles, as we will uncover in this video, lies in their ability to provide a framework for understanding the mechanics and rules that govern reality itself. It's thrilling to witness how ancient wisdom begins to intersect with modern science, particularly quantum physics, forming a focal point that imparts a sense of empowerment and profound knowledge on how to not just live, but thrive in this world. Let's initiate on this path together and discover the timeless wisdom these principles have to offer. The Kybalion introduces the principle of mentalism with the phrase, "The all is mind, the universe is mental."
The first principle from the Hermetic series is the principle of mentalism. Well, the concept that they're talking about is that our intelligence, our consciousness, our mental activity is what is actually creating the world that we live in. Well, that sounds like a really weird idea, but guess what? It is ultimate modern quantum physics. Even on the founding day of quantum physics in 1927, Max Planck, one of the founding fathers of this science, recognized that consciousness is creating our life experiences. How you are thinking and what you're believing and how you behave is actually manifesting the experiences we have in this world. Well, Planck gave us the idea that consciousness creates our life experiences. This idea from 1927 is as valid today as it was then. A recent article in the journal Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal on this planet, by Richard Conn Henry, a physicist from Johns Hopkins University, wrote an article entitled The Mental Universe. Well, I'm not going to go through all the details of the article because it's all summed up in the last sentence of the article. Quote, "The universe is immaterial. It's mental and spiritual. Live and enjoy." The concept that quantum physics has revealed is that our mental character is actually creating the world. Well, this is profoundly important just from a simple scientific point of view. For example, we talk about what we call the placebo effect. Someone has an illness, they take a drug that is told to them to be what they needed to heal themselves with, they take the drug, they get better. And then we find out that the drug they took was a sugar pill. So the question is then, what healed this person? And the answer was the positive thinking that resulted from the placebo effect. Well, guess what? There's a consequence of negative thinking. That's called the nocebo effect. And most of the illnesses on this planet can actually be really related back to negative consciousness. The nocebo effect is the opposite of the placebo effect. Yet both placebo and nocebo are mental constructions. And so basically what we have to understand is our thinking indeed is creating our world, and there's a difference between positive thinking and negative thinking.
The Kybalion continues with the principle of correspondence, with the phrase, as above, so below. As below, so above.
Geometry is the math that provides for structure in space. The geometry that we all took in school was called Euclidean geometry. If you remember, that's a geometry with squares and triangles, circles, pyramids, all these kinds of objects and structure in space. Well, it's very interesting because the Euclidean geometry is what we use to create our world today. The houses, the buildings, even the technology and electronics, etc., all comes down to understanding the geometry of a Euclidean nature, okay? Well, here's the issue. Is there a geometry that makes a tree? Is there a geometry that makes a snail? Yes, there is. And it turns out it's called fractal geometry. It's a very simple equation. But here's the nature of the equation, that you solve the equation and you get an answer. But the neat part is now you take the answer and feed it back into the same equation, solve it again. You get another answer. Take that answer, feed it back in. It's an iteration. It's a repeat of the same pattern over and over again, using, guess what? The same original formula. Since you're using the same equation, the patterns in the geometry repeat themselves at higher or lower levels of organization. So if you're trying to understand a pattern at a higher level of organization, then you could go back and look for the same pattern at a lower level of that mathematics, make sense out of it at the lower level, and then take that information and understand the higher level. It comes down to something you've heard your whole life. It's called as above, so below. So basically, it said you can see the structure of the universe in patterns that replicate in self-similar fashion at any level of organization. It's a very simple one that I work with all the time is cell biology. You could look at the human and say, look at all the functions in this human body. Well, that's very complex, 50 trillion cells. But guess what? In a single nucleated cell in your body, all the functions that you have in your body are already present in a cell. The cell has respiration, digestion, excretion. Cells even have an immune system. It's the same mechanism that's used in the higher organization, which is then a human body. In other words, there's a repetition in the structure from as above to below, not a new age idea, but a fundamental principle and fractal geometry. Now, an interesting point about it is, as far as we know, fractal geometry came into awareness in the 1980s with Mandelbrot. Well, obviously, 5,000 years ago, they obviously knew it as well, which then says, how smart are we, or how smart were the people that gave rise to us? This is an important part for looking at the nature of the Hermetic principles.
The Kybalion moves forward with the third principle, vibration, with the phrase, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates.
The principle of vibration is so interesting because everything in the universe is moving all the time. It's always vibrating and moving. When quantum physics first looked at the atom, as the earlier physicists, they saw the physical structures of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But as they started to take it apart, they found out at the very bottom, there wasn't anything physical, it was a vortex of energy. You can visualize energy by taking a rock and dropping it into a pond. Well, the energy of the rock as it hits the water is translated into the pond water. What is the result? Ripples that radiate out, ripples and ripples radiating out. That is the shape of energy. The energy is a force who is shaping matter. It's the energy underneath the water. It's continuously vibrating. Waves and ripples come out of atoms. Atoms are spinning vortexes of energy, and in the process, they make waves, and these ripples go out into space. Everything in the known universe in regard to the physical experience is based on atoms, and all atoms are energy vortices with ripples that radiate out. Atoms are nano tornadoes. Well, let's consider then the real tornado. It's a spinning vortex of energy. Try and drive your car through a tornado. As you get to the tornado, the force field of that vibration can actually lift up your car and throw it away. Vortices of energies, nanotornadoes have force fields to them. I can see a tornado. It's got all the debris and the dirt and the dust that's been picked up by the windstorm and thrown all around. If you take the dirt and dust out of the tornado, it's still an energy force field, even though now you can't see it. An energy force is invisible, but you can feel it because it will push on you, you push on it. That feels physical. As far as we know, the ancient people weren't talking quantum physics, but they obviously knew quantum physics because they understood the nature of the vibration. Even though they live in a world like we live in the world that appears to be physical, this ancient wisdom was built into the Hermetic principles.
The Kybalion progresses to the fourth principle, polarity, marked by the phrase, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites, like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled.
The Hermetic principle of polarity talks about the fact that there are opposites, but they're the same. How can they be opposites and be the same? Well, let's go back to the understanding of an atom. And I talked about the fact that an atom, you can see its action through the ripples in a pond. And it's sort of actually what is called a sine wave. And a sine wave goes up, and a sine wave goes down, and a sine wave goes up, and it goes down. But there's a midpoint. At the midpoint, if you look at the wave going up, we would say that's the positive. But when it goes back down to the midpoint and goes under the midpoint, that's the negative. So we talk about a graph with a line positive above, negative below. But guess what? The same ripple is positive for some part and then negative for the other part. Polarities represent an extension of a continuum. That on one side is one extreme of that continuum and the other side is the other extreme. They came from the same ripple that's going up and down. And so when we look at the world, we have a tendency to focus on the polarities, good, bad, night, day. All these different polarities that we have generated all represent the same. Day and night is a cycle. You can plot it. It's all the same. Can I separate day from night? No, you can't. They're all the same vibration. But this is important for us to understand because we have a tendency to move to one side of the polarity, move to the other side of the polarity, and this creates a problem in our world, especially when we divide, let's say, politics or any level of consciousness. We say this side says this and this side says that. They look like opposite sides, but the truth is they're all on the same wavelength. And the important part for us to understand is where should we be in this wave up and down, the midpoint? Because you say, well, that side was negative. If you erase it and don't put it into your picture and you only look at the positive side, you're not seeing the whole picture. You need to see both sides to make the picture. Life experiences reveal the polarity between good and bad. These are teachings. We learn what is good and what is bad, and we recognize they're all on the same emotional wavelength. This is not a modern concept. This is a concept from thousands of years ago, but makes sense in a world of quantum physics of the energy, the vibration, and the wavelength. So the Hermetic principles, again, were based on some knowledge way back then that we are in our current world finally recognizing. But it brings up an interesting fact. How do they know all this back 5,000 years ago?
The Kybalion advances to the fifth ancient teaching, the principle of rhythm, and it is defined by the phrase, everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates.
In the Hermetic principle dealing with rhythm, recognize this very simple fact. All atoms are actually energy vibrations. Well, a vibration has a rhythm. There's an up phase and a down phase, and an up phase and a down phase. Well, this rhythm can also be present in our life. There are times when you're in harmony with it going up, And these are the good feeling times, these are great. And there are times when we seem to be out of harmony, but that's because the rhythm is going down in the opposite polarity. So the point about the rhythm is, if you can choose and you can engage, then you can ride the rhythm and then make your life smooth rather than abrupt changes of good, bad, good, bad. It's a flow, it's a wavelength. Historically, this wavelength characterizes much of the history of this planet. So the original people, the indigenous people, they understood the rhythm. They lived in the balance. They lived in the middle part so that their lives were living in harmony. It's interesting because in our social evolution, we started at balance, went to spirituality with polytheism, then ultimate spirituality, monotheism, and then there was a revolt, and it's called the Protestant Reformation. And they started to say, well, wait, maybe matter isn't as bad as the church was claiming it was, because the church was at the top of the pole, the bottom of the pole was matter, and the church said, well, that stuff at the bottom is not good. And then that wave started to come back down toward the middle. We crossed the middle, it's called deism, the belief of nature and God being the same thing. Nature being the physical reality, God being the spiritual reality, and deism said they're both the same thing. Well, interestingly, that deism is the foundational principle of the United States when it was first formed by the founding fathers. But it's a wave, it didn't stop at the midpoint. Well, as the wave started to go in the material realm, we started to let go of the spiritual realm. That matter now becomes the most important thing. Well, we let go of the spiritual, so where does life come from in the material world? And the answer they came up with was genes. Genes represented the source of the physical experience. And then all of a sudden we say, yep, spirit's not necessary, we've got genes. There was a point where people said, there's something more than the physical realm. And they started to look at healing in a different way. They started to recognize that you could heal with energy. You could heal with consciousness. The people started to say, yeah, but that's the invisible part. The material realm started to transition back into what? That there's a spiritual realm that we've left out of the story. So if you understand, we pull back and look at the flow. The flow is what? A sine wave. And a sine wave shows us there's an up and a down and an up and a down. But the sine wave is the example of rhythm, that you put both of them together and then you can make a vibration that goes up and down like that. So again, the whole principle is coming back at this point.
Transitioning to the sixth foundational teaching, the principle of cause and effect, described with the phrase, every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause, everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. The Kybalion.
So the point of cause and effect is actions cause reactions. But reactions then alter the original cause of the first action. So it doesn't have one cycle, it's repetitious the whole time. Everything is action, reaction, action, reactions. If you want to understand how in the universe you see something moving, you automatically know there must have been something that pushed it in the first place to move. So the basic understanding of cause and effect, action, reaction is built into our world of view and our world understanding. Well, sometimes this might be applied misdirectly. A scientist by the name of Michael Denton started to look at the universe and started to recognize that the waves of interaction of all the things in the universe lead to a cause of a creation. Well, the idea that there is a creation led some people to say, well, if there's a creation, there's a creator. And, well, what's God to a lot of people? The energy. The universe, everything that is. But they make that energy into a person. The white bearded guy up in the sky is the physical creator. I say, no, but perceiving that there's a creation, they automatically, with the idea of cause and effect, use that principle to say, well, there must be a cause. So what we're really beginning to understand in the world of quantum physics is that everything is energy. Well, energies interact with energies. A thought is a creative energy. You can create a thought, But that thought, being an energy, can alter the physical reality of yourself even. So your thoughts being broadcast are a cause, but the energy of the thought engages with the energy of the atoms of your body and are manifest as an experience, cause and effect. That just simplifies why the biology belief is so important, because your consciousness is a cause that results in an effect as perceived in your body.
The principle of gender, the seventh and final wisdom, is embodied in the phrase, "Gender is in everything." Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes, the Kybalion.
So from the wave of an atom to the intelligence of the human, it's all been divided into what we have perceived and labeled as male and female, but recognizing all organisms have both characteristics. In a cell, they have both energies. A cell cannot live with just male characteristics or with just female characteristics. So what's the difference? Male characteristics are associated with structure and movement. Female characteristics are associated with vegetation and reproduction. In other words, growth, and this is support. Both support and growth are in every present cell. You have the support part, which is your skeleton, in fact. That's a big deal, the muscles and the skeleton. But you have the vegetative part. Well, those are the organs of the gut that are taking care of the metabolism, cleaning up the system. Over the evolution, the cells started to split because of differentiation of function. And one cell says, okay, I'll handle the support, but I can only work with it if you handle the vegetative. So it took both the male and female, but you have to work them together. And the significance about this is even in the cell, both of them are there, but it's even in the human. In the human, we have both a female and male characteristic to it. And the simplest one is just look at the brain. There's a line right down the middle of the brain. That line separates what are called the hemispheres, left and right. Well, they're totally two different functions. The left hemisphere is associated with intellectual thinking and stuff like that. The right hemisphere is associated with emotion. Gender plays an important role, but then also recognize this, just like polarity that we talked about before, it's all on the same wavelength. They're not separate from each other. Both are required. Emphasize the left, more intellectual. Emphasize the right, more emotional. And then label them as what? Male, intellectual, female, emotional. They were the same thing. They were always a continuum of the same thing. There is a difference in gender, yes, but we have created an artificial separation of that through the programming that we acquire in the first 7 years of our life. Human programming has caused a separation. You want to understand how to live in harmony? Go back and recognize each of the principles in the Hermetic series, because when you put them all together, it is a guide for us to thrive into the future. And it's interesting because there's an old saying from Mark Twain. He said, "The older I get, the smarter my father becomes." And the idea is the older we get in civilization, now we can look back and say how smart those people were at the very beginning. And we should honor that.
We've compiled a list of the mechanisms that explain how the universe works. Understanding these mechanisms is crucial because it shows that by using them, you can manifest the life you desire. The key word here is use. Simply being aware of these mechanisms without applying them is a waste of your time and life. You must actively use these principles in your daily life as they determine the character of your life. Think about what you truly care about in this world. What excites you and makes you feel passionate about living? Discover what drives your heart and makes you feel good. Turn this discovery into an intention. It's not just about knowledge. Intention means actively striving toward something. What are you striving toward in your life? This is important because many of us focus on what we don't want instead of what we do want. According to the Hermetic Principles, you can manifest what's in your mind. Therefore, focus on the positive picture you want to create. By placing that picture in your consciousness and manifesting it through intention, you can create your desired experience. Now that you have a clear picture of what you want and know what you like, you must set an intention and activate it to manifest the experience.
You are the creator, and that's exactly how you do it.